AITA for my reaction after overhearing my husband planning a divorce with his lover at 2 a.m. The taxi stopped in front of the house in the Pacific Heights neighborhood. 2 years in London evaporated before the immutable white stone facade. I paid the driver and took a deep breath. The air smelled of damp fog and fallen leaves. Autumn in San Francisco. My suitcase rolled over the sidewalk. I looked up at the third-floor balcony. The blinds were pulled down. Strange for a Saturday morning. The key turned with a familiar click. The foyer was dimly lit. "Hello, David. Are you there?" Silence. I left my suitcase next to the empty coat rack. The house smelled of clean bleach and emptiness. Too tidy. I walked into the living room. On the dining table sat a single glass. On the sofa, a cushion lay slightly sunken, as if someone had been sitting there alone for a long time. I raised the blinds. The light flooded the room, revealing a thin layer of dust on the mantelpiece. Above it hung our wedding photo. Me in the white dress, him smiling with that smile that even then did not reach his eyes. 15 years. I heard footsteps upstairs, quick, then stopped. "David," I called again. He appeared at the top of the stairs. He was wearing sweatpants and an old t-shirt. His hair, always so perfect, was messy. "Beth, you are here." He did not come down, did not open his arms. He just stood there looking at me as if I were a ghost. "The flight arrived early," I said, forcing a light tone. "I sent you a message." "I have not seen it. The phone is charging." "Lie." I saw it poking out of his back pocket. "Are you okay?" I asked, slowly climbing the steps. Yes, just a little cold. I did not want to infect you." I got closer. He took an almost imperceptible step back. "Cold in October. How strange." I smiled, stopping 3 feet away. "Do you need anything? A tea?" No, I am fine." "You should rest from the trip. You must be exhausted." His gaze escaped toward the closed guest bedroom door. "You are right," I nodded. "I am going to unpack." I walked past him, feeling the tension radiating from his body. In our bedroom, the bed was perfectly made, too perfect, like in a hotel. I opened my suitcase and began to hang the clothes in the closet. On one side hung his suits. On the other, my half stood empty for 2 years. Dinner was an exercise in forced nostalgia. He asked about London, work, the weather. Nothing about us. Nothing about "how are you?" Nothing about "I missed you." "The firm is doing well," he said, playing with his wine glass. "A lot of work." "I am glad," I replied, cutting my steak with surgical precision. "Sometimes work is a good refuge." He looked up, a flash of something. Alarm in his eyes. "Refuge from what?" "Oh, I do not know." I shrugged. "From loneliness, from the silence in an empty house." He did not answer. He took a long sip. At night we went to bed early. He turned his back almost immediately. I stayed awake listening to his breathing that pretended to be deep and regular. He faked it poorly. At 2 in the morning my throat was dry. I carefully got out of bed, stepping on the floorboards I knew did not creak. The hallway was dark. From the guest room at the end of the corridor, a faint glow leaked under the door, and his voice a whisper. I approached without making a sound. My heart was beating in my neck. "I know, honey, I know, but it has to be after the holidays. It is cleaner." A pause. He was listening. "Yes, after New Year's. I will tell her and we will start the paperwork. Promise you. Then everything will be ours. Just a little more patience. I love you." A kiss through the phone. Sigh. Then silence. I leaned against the cold wall. The world tilted slightly. I took a deep breath once, twice. The cold I felt was not from the wall. It was from inside, from a place that had just been emptied. I returned to bed. I lay down. I looked at his back, the line of his shoulders under the sheet. No, I would not say anything. Not yet. The Beth who arrived today from London had died in that hallway. Now another sat up in her place, one with her eyes wide open. The next morning he made pancakes, a rare gesture. "I thought you might crave something from home," he said, serving me a piece. "What a nice touch." I replied, taking a bite. It was salty. "You are right. In London I missed this and other things." He sat across from me. "Other things?" "Yes," I said, looking directly at him. "The space, the time, family." I thought a lot there alone about what we really want. He tensed up. And what conclusion did you reach? That sometimes you have to renew or reconnect. I paused, letting the words float. For example, I have been thinking maybe we should try to have a child. The fork fell from his hand, hitting the plate with a metallic clink. A what? A child, David. I know Matthew is already grown. He is in college. But our house, our life needs something new. Someone new, a fresh start. We could start trying right after New Year's when everything is quieter. His face was a poem of panic. He paled, then turned red, swallowed hard. Beth. That is crazy. We are at a certain age. You with your career. Me, my career. I cut in sweetly. My career is set and our age is perfect. We are stable. It would be wonderful, would it not? I smiled. The emptiest and brightest smile I could manufacture. Think about it. A baby. Our baby. He stood up so fast the chair almost fell. No, I cannot talk about this right now. I have to go to the gym. I have skipped my routine. He left the kitchen. I heard him grab the car keys and the front door slam shut. I sat there finishing my cold pancakes. They tasted of salt and betrayal and something else, of power. The first move was made. He was off balance, scared, confused. I, from my silence, from my ice smile, had all the time in the world to plan the next one. The game had finally begun and I had no intention of losing it. David's flight to the gym lasted all morning. I took advantage. I went through the house like an archaeologist at a site of lies. Everything seemed normal, too normal. Until I reached his sanctuary, the office. It was a small room lined with law books in French and English. His computer, of course, had a password, but David was a man of habits and one of them was vanity. I tried his birth year followed by our son's initials, 1975 MC. The desktop lit up. Too easy an access, as if he had never feared an intrusion. I quickly checked his emails. Nothing explicit, just bills, firm matters, invitations to conferences, too neat. Then I opened the browser history, completely erased. A man who never deleted his history had suddenly become meticulous. My eyes scanned the shelves. Among the heavy legal codes stood out an old, worn copy of The Great Gatsby. A gift from me 1,000 years ago. Picked it up. I opened it to the middle and there, between the pages of the party scene, rested 2 carefully folded strips of paper. 2 tickets for the San Francisco Opera. La Traviata from the week before. The night he had told me he had an unavoidable lawyer's dinner in Sacramento. My finger caressed the glossy paper. 1 ticket torn, the other intact. He had kept hers. A souvenir. I put the intact ticket in my pants pocket. Then I called Emily, my anchor in San Francisco, the only one who knew the raw truth of my marriage, even before I left. Beth, honey, are you in San Francisco? Yes. And I need you to be my private detective again. Oh no. Not that again, Beth. 2 years ago. 2 years ago I left so I would not go crazy. Now I have returned and I am saner than ever and I need a name. I described the tickets to her. A deep sigh echoed on the other end of the line. Okay, but this is the last time. Seriously, give me some time. The time passed between cups of cold tea and the view out the window. My phone vibrated at nightfall. A message from Emily, a name and a stolen photo from a LinkedIn profile. Nicole Foster, a lawyer specializing in intellectual property. She joined David's firm 9 months ago. She managed a joint project with him. In the photo, a woman with an intense gaze, dark hair gathered in a perfect bun, a professional smile that did not reach her eyes. Young, clear, dangerous. Thank you, Emily. I muttered to myself. The rage then was not a flash, but a cold slab that settled in my stomach. 9 months. The time to gestate a life or to end one. The next day, David got up early, making noise in the kitchen. His morning ritual was immutable. Strong coffee, 2 toasts, the digital newspaper. I watched him from the doorway, already dressed. Leaving so early? He asked without looking up from his phone. I have to go to the office, reclaim my old desk, and I have appointments. A lot to catch up on. Was his only reply. I watched him prepare his old Italian-style coffee maker, the one I gave him. He filled it with water, put in the ground coffee, fitted it on the stove. His back was turned to me. A moment of distraction. I slipped to the guest bathroom medicine cabinet. Between painkillers and Band-Aids, I found an old, mild laxative almost expired. I prepared 2 pills into a fine odorless powder. I gathered it on a piece of paper. I went back to the kitchen. David was on the balcony talking on the phone in a low voice. His favorite mug, the blue ceramic one, was empty in the sink with wet grounds at the bottom. My chance. With quick and silent movements, I sprinkled the white powder over the dark grounds. It blended perfectly. Then I placed the mug right next to the coffee maker, in the spot he always used. An innocent reminder. "Everything okay?" I asked when he came back inside, quickly hanging up the call. Yes. An annoying client," he said, avoiding my gaze. His hand went straight to the mug. He filled it with the steaming coffee, and brought it to his lips without suspecting a thing. Half an hour later, I was in my car parked 2 blocks away looking at the map on my phone. He left the house pale and hurried toward the BART station. He would not get far. My phone rang mid-morning. His number. Beth. His voice sounded weak, broken. "I will not be able to make it to lunch." Something did not sit well with me. My stomach. "Oh, poor thing," I said with a voice steeped in concern. "The coffee, maybe. Sometimes when it is very strong. Stay home, rest. I will be back soon." I hung up. A cold smile formed on my lips. Revenge, in small doses, had a strangely satisfying taste. It was not the final blow, far from it, just a reminder, a little imbalance in his perfect world. The first sign that this time I was not the silent victim. I was the shadow at his door, the disruption in his cup, and I had only just begun. David's indisposition lasted 2 days. 2 days in which I was the solicitous wife. I brought him cups of broth, put cool compresses on his forehead, and faked a concern that had rusted years ago. He, pale and sweaty, looked at me with a mix of guilt and suspicion that I enjoyed deciphering. "It must have been something you ate at the firm," I would say, tucking him in. "Fast food is not good for a man your age." "I did not eat anything weird," he murmured, turning toward the wall. While he dozed, I worked. Nicole Foster ceased to be a blurry photo and became a person through LinkedIn, social media, and the old reliable Emily behind her profile. 32 years old, daughter of a notary from a small town up north, graduated with honors, ambitious, with a history of short, useful relationships. Her latest update was a photo in a trendy restaurant, smiling behind a glass of wine. In the barely visible reflection of the glass, a man's hand could be seen with a watch I knew all too well, David's. Anger was a luxury I could not afford. I turned it into cold calculation. I needed to see her not from afar but face to face. Measure my enemy. And maybe, just maybe, find a crack. On Monday, David went back to work, still pale. I gave him a kiss on the cheek, more of a stamp than a gesture of affection. "Be careful what you eat, honey." He nodded, escaping the house as if there were demons in it. I waited an hour. Then I dressed with simple elegance. Black pants, a turtleneck sweater, an austere coat, nothing to draw attention. I took my car and drove to the elegant glass building where David and I now knew Nicole worked in the financial district. I stationed myself in a corner cafe overlooking the main entrance. At 2 in the afternoon, I saw her come out. She was alone, talking on her cell phone. She was more petite than she appeared in the photos, with a contained energy in every step. Her clothes were expensive but discreet. She headed toward a side street, probably to some restaurant. I followed her, not too closely. She went into a small set menu place. I waited 5 minutes, then went in. The place was full of office workers. I saw her sitting at a table for 2 by the window, glancing at the menu. I took a deep breath. This was not the original plan, but the opportunity was too clear. I approached her table with a smile of genuine surprise. "Excuse me, is this chair free?" "It is just that it is completely full." She looked up. Her eyes were brown, intelligent, evaluating. She looked me up and down quickly, classifying me. A woman of a certain age, well-dressed, no threat. "No, of course, sit down," she said with a professional smile. I sat down, ordered the first thing I saw on the menu, then looked at her. "Sorry to bother you. It is just that this place is always packed." "Do you come here often?" "Sometimes," she replied, polite but distant. "I work nearby," I lied. "In an agency." I bore honestly. Feels endless sometimes. Good thing I have my husband who is also engrossed all day. He is a lawyer, you know how they are. A slight blink, a micro-gesture of interest. Yes. At what firm? Oh, at a small one around the financial district. Nothing to do with the big firms like his. What is it called? Westbrook and Associates. The name of David's firm. Ah yes, she said, taking a sip of water. I know some people there. My husband's name is Mark. I dropped without blinking. Mark Thompson. Does it sound familiar? She shook her head, relaxing a bit. It did not sound familiar. Well, mine is in a tremendous mess. I continued, lowering my voice as if in confidence. We have been, I do not know, 8 or 9 months like two strangers, always working, always in meetings. Sometimes I think if it were not for the house, the routine, we would not even see each other anymore. It is exasperating. Her eyes locked onto mine. There was the recognition. The same time, 8 months. It was not a coincidence. It is difficult, she murmured, looking away. This world consumes a lot. You are a lawyer too, right? I asked, seeing the folder of documents next to her. Yes. At Westbrook. Actually, what a coincidence, I exclaimed, feigning amazement. It is a small world and it is going well for you. Do you not feel suffocated sometimes by so much work? She opened her mouth to answer when her phone vibrated on the table. The screen lit up. A name appeared. David with 2 heart emojis. The blood pounded in my ears. The heart emojis, small and pink, seemed to me the most obvious thing I had ever seen. She picked up the phone quickly, almost modestly. Excuse me, I have to take this. Do not worry, I said, smiling while my heart hammered against my chest. She spoke in a low voice, almost a whisper. Yes, no, do not worry tonight, yes, at 9. I love you. She hung up. Her face had softened for an instant with a sweetness that nauseated me. Then she put the professional mask back on. A work emergency, she said as if apologizing. Of course there always are. I nodded. Listen, it has been a pleasure chatting. Sometimes we need to vent with someone who is not involved in our own mess. I searched in my purse and took out a fake business card I had made days before. Just in case you ever want to grab a coffee and complain about our workaholic husbands. My name is Sarah, by the way, Sarah Mitchell. She took the card, put it away without much conviction. Nicole Foster. Nice to meet you. We each paid our own bill. Stepping out onto the street, the October sun suddenly seemed blinding. I had seen her eyes, I had heard her tone of voice with him, and I had seen that heart on the screen. Information was power, and now I had a little more. That afternoon I decided to make another visit, a less planned but necessary one. I took the car and drove to my mother-in-law Eleanor's house in the Presidio Heights area. A large, dark house, full of heavy furniture and memories of better times. Eleanor received me with her usual coldness. An air kiss near the cheek. Beth, what a surprise. David did not tell me you had returned. It was a sudden decision, I said, following her to the living room. And David has been a little indisposed. That is why I came alone. We poured tea. The silence was thick, only broken by the clinking of the teaspoon against the porcelain. You look well, she said without looking me in the eyes. London suited you. Yes. Sometimes distance clarifies things. Yes. And what has it clarified? I looked directly at her. Her eyes, the same steel gray as her son's, did not blink. That sometimes you fight for things that are no longer worth it or that never were. That is very philosophical. Dear, does not suit you. I took a sip of tea that was too bitter. David seems distant. Is something wrong with him? Something you know about? She placed the cup on the saucer with a sharp clack. David is a man. He has his worries. His job is very demanding. You who have been away for 2 years, perhaps you have forgotten what life is like by his side. I have not forgotten, I said, keeping my voice calm. I just remembered how it was before, when we were happy, when he did not have to hide calls at 9 at night. The atmosphere in the room froze. Eleanor looked at me, and for the first time I saw something beyond disapproval. I saw knowledge and complicity. I do not know what you mean, she said, but her voice was weak. I think you do, I stood up. I think you know perfectly well. And I wonder, Eleanor, how can you sleep at night knowing that your son is destroying his family while you turn a blind eye? Her face paled, then turned red with fury. How dare you? This is my house. And that one out there, I nodded in the general direction of my home, was mine, or it used to be. Now it is just the place where your son plans to divorce me after New Year's, after the awkwardness of the family holidays passes. Beautiful Christmases await us, do they not? I did not wait for her answer. I turned around and left that house, leaving behind the smell of mothballs and betrayal. Returning to my car, I was trembling not from sadness, but from pure crystalline rage. It was not just David. It was not just Nicole. It was Eleanor. A whole system against me. I drove back home, hands gripping the steering wheel. The headlights cut through the falling darkness. In the silence of the car, the strategy became clear, brutal in its simplicity. It was no longer just about defending myself or hurting David. It was about setting his entire world on fire, turning each of them, David, Nicole, Eleanor herself, against each other. I would sit in the middle of the flames, I would light myself and watch them burn. When I got home, David still had not returned. The house was dark and silent. I turned on a single lamp in the living room and poured myself a whiskey. Alone, I toasted with my reflection in the black window. To war, I whispered. And the first shot had been today. A coffee, a chat, a fake card, the first crack in his perfect facade. Tomorrow I would start to widen it. David's birthday fell on a Friday. He, still trembling around the edges from my supposed desire for a child, had suggested an intimate dinner. I insisted on a party. After 2 years away, I want to gather all our friends, I said, stroking his cheek with a coldness he took for affection. Show that we are still here, stronger than ever. The organization was my shield. Every detail, a stitch in the web I was weaving around him. I invited his colleagues from the firm, including, of course, Nicole. The invitation came from the Carter family, impersonal, unavoidable. I called Eleanor. It will be at home. I hope you come. After our last conversation, I think it is necessary. She accepted with a tense voice. Curiosity or duty outweighed her displeasure. The day before, I went to a boutique on Union Street. I knew from the Instagram photos Nicole had not blocked the style she liked. Elegant, discreet, expensive. I found a red dress, a blood-red silk dress with thin straps and a cut that kissed the body without being vulgar. It was identical almost down to the seam to the one she had posted wearing 3 weeks ago at a gala dinner. I bought two, one in my size, another sent anonymously to her office with a card that read, for the woman who has everything. Happy birthday. The night arrived. The house filled with noise, fake laughter, and the smell of canapes and expensive perfume. I circulated like the perfect hostess. I wore a simple black dress. David, with a stiff smile, followed me like an uncomfortable shadow. Nicole arrived late. I saw her walk in, searching with her eyes. She wore a navy blue dress, elegant but safe. She had received my gift, seen it, and chosen not to wear it. Smart. Point for her. David tensed when he saw her. He approached. The kisses on the cheeks were quick, professional. No one seemed to notice the panic in his eyes. I love your dress, Nicole, I said, approaching with 2 glasses of champagne. Very discreet, thank you, Beth, she replied, accepting the glass with an equally fake smile. The house is beautiful. Oh, this is nothing, I replied, taking a sip. Wait till you see the show later. I left the sentence hanging in the air and walked away. For an hour I fed the normalcy. I talked with old friends, laughed with the wives of his colleagues, toasted to my husband's health. He watched me, growing paler, waiting for a blow that did not come. Until it did. I slipped upstairs, took off the black dress and put on the red one. I looked at myself in the mirror. The silk was a second skin, the color a declaration of war. I walked down the stairs slowly, making each step sound in the silence that gradually formed around me. First, those closest to the stairs stopped talking. Then, like a ripple, the silence spread through the living room to the terrace. All eyes locked on me and then inevitably jumped to Nicole in her discreet navy blue. The contrast could not be more grotesque, more deliberate. Nicole stood paralyzed, her glass halfway to her lips. Her face broke into a grimace of horror, of shame, of pure rage. David by her side looked ready to pass out. Eleanor, from a corner, squeezed the glass she held until her knuckles turned white. I walked toward the center of the room, where a small improvised stage awaited for the toasts. I took a glass of champagne from a stunned waiter's tray. Dear friends, I said. my voice clearly cutting through the sepulchral silence. Thank you for coming to celebrate this wonderful man. I smiled at David, whose face was a plaster mask. These last few months back home have made me see how precious family is, what is built with time and love. I paused, letting the tension become almost unbearable, and sometimes I continued, lowering my voice a bit confidentially. Life gives second chances when you least expect it. That is why I wanted to share with you on this very special day our most recent joy. I placed my free hand over my flat stomach with an instinctive protective gesture. David and I are going to be parents again. The outburst was immediate. Shouts of surprise, hugs, pats on the back for David, who took the blows like a rag doll. Women approached me, kissed me, congratulated me with tears in their eyes. Through the forest of bodies I looked for Nicole. She was standing motionless as if nailed to the floor. The glass of red wine she held slowly tilted and crashed against the marble floor. The dark red liquid splashed her blue dress and her bare shoes, forming a grotesque puddle at her feet. She did not seem to notice. Her eyes, full of a hatred and a pain so intense I could almost feel it from a distance, were fixed on me. Then on David, who did not even look at her. Without a word, she turned around and ran toward the entrance, pushing past a couple of guests who tried to stop her. The door slammed shut behind her, rattling the glasses on a nearby table. The party naturally died shortly after. The guests left with rushed excuses, their looks full of morbid curiosity and unanswered questions. Eleanor approached me before leaving, her face a stone mask. "What the hell are you doing, Beth?" she whispered with a voice laced with venom. "Celebrating family, Eleanor," I answered with my sweetest smile. "Just as you always wanted." She left without another word. David had disappeared. I found him in the study emptying half a bottle of whiskey into a glass. The room was dark, only illuminated by the moonlight coming through the window. "Are you satisfied?" he growled without looking at me. "Have you managed to completely humiliate me?" "Humiliate you, David," I said, leaning against the door frame. "I have only shared good news." "Our good news." "There is no news," he roared, throwing the glass against the wall. The glass shattered into 1,000 pieces. "Are you lying? Is it another one of your lies?" I approached him slowly, stepping on the glass fragments that crunched under my shoes. "Lies? Like yours, David? Like the promises you make to your lover on the phone while your wife sleeps in the next room?" He lost his breath. The smell of alcohol and fear seeped from his pores. "What? What are you saying?" "I am saying," I sighed, taking my phone out of the hidden pocket of my red dress, "that your memory is very short. Or maybe you think I am an idiot. Let me refresh it for you." I searched for the audio file and pressed play. In the charged silence of the room, his own voice, low, intimate, full of false promises, filled the space. "I know, honey, I know, but it has to be after the holidays. It is cleaner. Yes, after New Year's. I will tell her and we will start the paperwork. Promise you. Then everything will be ours. Just a little more patience. I love you." The sound of his world crumbling was not a roar, but a deep silence broken only by his gasping. He collapsed into the armchair as if his legs had turned to jelly. He looked at me, and for the first time in 15 years, I saw pure terror in my husband's eyes. Terror of me. How? How did I get it? I finished the question for him, turning off the phone. It does not matter. The important thing is that I have it, and I have more. I have opera tickets. I have witnesses who have seen you together, and now I have half of San Francisco believing we are going to be a happy family again. I stepped closer until my red dress almost touched his knees. So this is what is going to happen, David. You are going to stop seeing Nicole. You are going to be the most loving and dedicated husband in the world. You are going to accompany me to all the doctor's visits, to smile at the ultrasounds, to plan the baby's room, and you are going to do it with a smile on your face. Because if you do not, I paused, letting the threat settle. This audio and everything else will go to the State Bar, to your mother, and to each and every one of the guests who were here tonight. He said nothing, just stared into the void, defeated. Understood? I asked softly. He nodded once, an almost imperceptible movement. Good, I said, straightening up. Then I will wait for you upstairs. Do not take too long. Tomorrow we have a lot to do. You will buy a stroller, I think, and some flowers, red roses maybe, for your pregnant wife. I left the study, leaving him among the remains of his whiskey and his shattered life. I walked up the stairs, the red dress flowing behind me like a banner. In the bedroom, I took off the dress, let it fall to the floor like dead skin, and put on a cotton nightgown. I got into bed on my side. Revenge, I thought as I turned off the light, was a bitter drink. But tonight, for the first time in years, it tasted sweet. The days that followed the party were a macabre play. David played the worried and loving husband with a dedication that would have been touching had it not been so grotesque. He came home early with flowers. He asked about my health, about the baby, with a soft voice that made me shudder with disgust. I maintained my role with a coldness that surprised even myself. I talked about names, colors for the room, the need to change the car for a bigger one. Every word was a nail in his social coffin. I was thinking we could look at strollers this Saturday, I said one morning during breakfast, watching his hand tremble slightly as he brought the cup to his lips. Of course, he replied, forcing a smile. Whatever you say. And your mother should come to lunch on Sunday to tell her in person more calmly. After what happened at the party, I think she deserves it. His smile froze. The idea of having Eleanor in front of me with this farce between us clearly terrified him. Do you think it is a good idea? She is a bit offended. I finished for him. I know. That is why it is important. We have to show a united family for the sake of the baby. He nodded, unable to refute it. The imaginary baby was already his most effective prison. Meanwhile, I worked on my next move. The recording was a powerful weapon, but temporary. I needed something more definitive, something that would tie his hands for good. And the idea arose in the most perverse way. If he played at faking affection for a fake pregnancy, I would fake an even more powerful reason for that affection to be indispensable. I spent an entire afternoon on the computer with skills I did not know I had. A Word document, the stolen letterhead of a prestigious San Francisco clinic from the internet, professional typography. I drafted a medical report with cold and devastating terms. Findings compatible with rapidly progressing neoplasia, guarded prognosis, options for aggressive treatment, limited time. I did not put a specific type of cancer, just the shadow of fatality. Then I printed the document on high-quality paper and folded it carefully. The opportunity arrived a few days later. David had had a particularly bad day at the firm. Nicole, according to my sources, Emily, always attentive, had been cold and distant with him. He arrived home with a scowl. I was in the living room with the lights low, the fake medical report trembling in my hands. I had cried, onions gently rubbed under my eyes to achieve a convincing redness. Beth, he asked upon seeing me. What is wrong? I did not answer. I just let a sob, perfectly modulated, escape my lips. I hid my face in my hands, leaving the paper visible on the sofa. He approached at first with impatience, then with alarmed curiosity. What is that? Nothing, I murmured, trying to grab the paper. It is nothing. But he was faster. He snatched it. His eyes scanned the lines. I saw his face change, first confusion, then disbelief, and finally a quick, cold calculation that hid behind a grimace of concern. My God, Beth, is this true? I did not want to tell you, I whispered, letting the tears, this time real, of pure tension roll down my cheeks. With everything of yours, with the joy of the baby, I did not want to ruin it. But this is extremely serious, he exclaimed, and in his voice there was genuine shock. Not for me, I knew instantly. It was the panic of a man seeing his plans, already so shaky, get unpredictably complicated. You have to start treatment right now, whatever it takes. I do not know if I have the strength, David, I said, looking at him with pleading eyes. With the baby it is a lot. Maybe I should rethink everything. That sentence was the key. Rethink everything, including, of course, the pregnancy. I saw the flash of alarm in his eyes. If I rethought the pregnancy, his farce would collapse. And if I died soon, the inheritance. The inheritance, always the inheritance. He knew, as I did, that my grandfather Albert, the patriarch of the family with his winery in Napa Valley, was a man of old-fashioned ideas. The united family above all. Do not say nonsense, he said, kneeling beside me with an almost comical abruptness. You are going to fight for yourself, for the baby, for us. I am here. I am not going to let you give up. He hugged me. His hug was stiff, awkward, but he held it. I let myself be comforted, hiding my smile on his shoulder. The hook was swallowed. It was the next day when the phone rang. It was my Aunt Connie from Sacramento. Her voice, usually serene, trembled. "Beth, it is your grandfather. He has had another heart attack. This time it is serious. Come quickly." I hung up and looked at David, who was watching from the kitchen door. "It is Grandpa Albert," I said. And I did not have to fake the fear in my voice. I loved him despite everything. "We have to go to Napa now." The car ride was silent, heavy. David drove with a clenched jaw. I looked out the window at the traditional fields giving way to the first vineyards. The family winery was not large, but its wine, scarce and excellent, was worth a fortune. And Grandpa, widowed and with no other grandchildren, was a walking will. The hospital smelled of disinfectant and approaching death. Albert, pale and small between the white sheets, looked like a wax version of himself. He took my hand with surprising strength. "Beth, child," he whispered, his voice a trickle of air. This is David." "Yes, Grandpa," I said, pointing to my husband who kept a respectful distance, his face a mask of filial concern. "Come closer, both of you." We approached. His glassy eyes scrutinized us from one to the other. I have been told happy news. A baby. Is it true?" "Yes, Grandpa," I confirmed, feeling David's hand resting damply on my shoulder. "Good, very good," he coughed weakly. "The family must continue. The winery, the legacy is not for unstable hands, not for divided hearts." His gaze locked onto David and for a second he seemed to see everything. The farce, the fear, the ambition. "I give it only to a solid marriage, to a real family. Do you understand me?" The message could not be clearer. David understood instantly. I saw his back tense, his breathing become deeper. The winery, the fortune tied not to blood, but to the appearance of our marriage. "Yes, Grandpa," David said, and his voice sounded strangely firm, convincing. "We understand perfectly. Do not worry. Beth and I are a team stronger than ever." Albert nodded, exhausted, and closed his eyes. We left the room in silence. In the gray hospital hallway, David stopped. He grabbed my arm, not hard but with a new urgency. "Beth," he said, his voice low. "Forget everything from before. The party the other night was a mistake. A moment of madness on my part. You and the baby are my family. The only thing that matters. I do not want a divorce. I am not going to ask for it." I looked him in the eyes. There was no love there, no remorse, only pure hard calculation. The inheritance was worth more than Nicole. It was worth more than his freedom. It was worth more than anything. "Really?" I asked with a weak voice of a sick, needy wife. "Really," he affirmed. And this time his smile almost seemed genuine. "Promise. Now let us go home. You have to rest. Both of you. Both of us. The imaginary baby and me. His new passport to wealth." I nodded, letting him guide me by the arm. As we walked down the hallway, I knew the game had changed boards. It was no longer just about humiliating him or defending myself. It was about an inheritance that was now unexpectedly at stake. And David had just shown his cards. He would play the role of the perfect husband to the end for the money. And I had to decide what that end would be. Whether to let him win an inheritance based on lies or find a way that when everything collapsed, he would take down not only his marriage but also his future. The storm was not subsiding. It was shifting and now brought the acrid smell of earth and money. And I would have to navigate it more carefully than ever. With the inheritance dangling like a golden carrot before him, David transformed. It was a repulsive metamorphosis in its zeal. He came home with absurd gifts. Stretch mark creams that I hid at the back of the closet, parenting books he left out in the open unopened, a huge stuffed elephant that seemed to watch me from a corner of the living room. His concern was clinical, a checklist for an exemplary husband that he followed to the letter. I fed the farce, left cups of chamomile half-drunk, whispered about morning sickness that never came, and spent hours locked in what we now called the baby's room, an empty guest room, pretending to plan decorations. The lie was my second skin and I wore it with a fatigue that was beginning to be real, but I could not focus only on him. Nicole was an unstable variable. David, trapped between his ambition and his lover, would give her increasingly flimsy excuses. A woman wounded in her pride and her heart is a dangerous weapon and I needed to control where she aimed. I called her from a hidden number. She answered on the third ring, her voice laden with a hope that shattered upon recognizing mine. Beth, how did you get this number? That does not matter, Nicole. We need to talk. I have nothing to say to you. He is lying to you. I blurted sharply. About the inheritance. The winery in Napa. It is worth a fortune and the grandfather will only leave it to a stable marriage. That is why he is not leaving. Not for me, for the money. Silence. A silence so thick I could almost feel her rage on the other end of the line. That is a lie, she murmured finally, but without conviction. Has he even mentioned the word inheritance to you? Or does he just tell you to be patient, that I am hysterical, that everything will be resolved soon? More silence. It was answer enough. He is using both of us, Nicole. You for companionship and excitement, me for money and respectability. And when he gets what he wants, what do you think will happen? Will he leave with you, ruining his reputation and giving up a fortune? You know him. Answer yourself. I heard her ragged breathing, the sound of a world crumbling for a second time. Why are you telling me? She asked hoarsely. What do you gain? That he loses, I answered simply and plainly. That he loses everything. And you can help me. Help you after what you did at the party. At the party I only showed the truth. Now I offer you good revenge. If you want, meet me tomorrow. If not, keep waiting for his crumbs. Your decision. I hung up before she could answer. The seed was planted. The next day, in a discreet hotel near the Embarcadero, Nicole appeared. She looked to have aged 5 years. She accepted the coffee I offered her with trembling hands. What do you want? She asked without preamble. Proof, I said. He is a lawyer. He is careful but not infallible. You work with him. You have seen things. Strange transfers, inflated invoices, clients of dubious origin, anything that could really hurt him, not just at home but in his career. That is illegal. He could go to jail and he could ruin your life if he feels like it. I reminded her. You have more to lose than I do, Nicole. I have already lost everything. I only have rage left. You still have a career. Do you want David Carter to remain a respected partner of the firm, while he leaves you dumped like a used rag? She took a thoughtful sip of coffee. The internal struggle was visible on her face, the residual loyalty, the wounded pride, the fear, and above all the desire to hurt. There are things, she admitted finally in a whisper, a client, an offshore company in the Cayman Islands. The funds do not add up. He manages the account and there are emails, conversations with an investigating judge who is a friend of his father's. Sensitive things. Get them, I said. Copies. Screenshots. Whatever, and keep them in a safe place. When I tell you, we will use them. And what do I get in return? The satisfaction of seeing him fall. And my guarantee that when this is over I will never mention your name. You will just be a colleague who left the firm. You will be able to rebuild your life far from here with the money you will have saved, because I know he did not spend much on you, right? Her silence was the confirmation. She nodded once quickly, as if afraid she would regret it. I need time. Take it, but not too much. He is getting more and more nervous. A nervous man makes mistakes. While Nicole reluctantly became my ally in the shadows, I set in motion the second flank of my attack. I needed someone to approach her from another angle, to corroborate whatever she gave me, to make her feel heard, and above all to record every confession. That is where Paul came in. My cousin Paul was an actor, not too successful, but with a gift for lying and a handsomeness that was convincing. I called him. I need you to charm a woman, I told him bluntly. Finally an interesting offer, he joked, but turned serious upon hearing the details. This is heavy, Beth. Safe, sure, and well paid. The money from the sale of some old paintings of my grandmother's that I had in a separate account served to finance the operation. We gave him an identity, Alex, a successful lawyer from Los Angeles passing through San Francisco. A chance encounter in the same cafe where I had met Nicole. Paul, with his tailored suit and his air of carefree confidence, was perfect. Within a week Nicole, vulnerable and angry, took the bait. Alex was understanding. He listened to her complaints about her tyrant boss and her complicated relationship with a coworker, and offered her a shoulder and glasses of expensive wine. And while she spoke, the small recorder in Paul's inside jacket pocket captured every word, every name, every compromising detail. Meanwhile, at home, the comedy continued. David accompanied me to a supposed first ultrasound at a private clinic. The gynecologist, a friend of Emily's who received a generous donation in exchange for her silence, ran the transducer over my empty belly while describing in a monotone voice a strong heartbeat and a perfectly sized embryo for its weeks. David held my hand, his palm sweaty. His smile was so stiff I wondered if his jaw would not ache later. The pressure, however, was beginning to take its toll on him. He started drinking more whiskey at night, alone in the study. One evening he came home with heavy breath and glassy eyes. I was in the living room leafing through a magazine. "Where is it?" he asked, his voice thick. "What?" I asked without looking up. The test, the one you bought. "I want to see it." My heart skipped a beat. I had not bought any test. It was an oversight, a stupid mistake. I threw it away. I said calmly, "It was used, David." "How gross." "You did not throw it away," he insisted, staggering closer. "A mother does not throw that away. It is a keepsake." "Where is it?" He began rummaging through the bathroom trash cans with a clumsy, pathetic determination. I froze, watching my farce crumble over a ridiculous detail. Not finding anything, he collapsed onto the bathroom floor, crying. "It is not true. Is it?" He sobbed with his head in his hands. "None of this is true. You are sick and you are not pregnant. It is all a lie." At that moment I knew the time for the next move had arrived. Compassion was not an option, only audacity. The next day, after he left for the firm with a monumental hangover and a new, poisonous suspicion in his eyes, I put the plan in motion. I went to a pharmacy far from home and bought a pregnancy test. At home I opened it carefully, wet it with tap water and a tiny touch of yellow food coloring, and let it dry. The result was a faint second line, barely visible but unmistakable. Then I wrapped it in toilet paper stained with a little red food coloring, and threw it in the bathroom trash, half hidden. That night I played my role again. I got into bed early, dressed in a loose nightgown. When he arrived smelling of alcohol and defeat, I was sitting up in bed, motionless, staring into space. I had turned off the lights. Only the bedside lamp illuminated my profile. "Beth," his hoarse voice said. I did not answer. "Beth, talk to me." "We lost it," I whispered in a voice that sounded so broken and distant that even I believed it for a second. He stopped dead. "What?" "This afternoon, a pain and then blood. It is gone." I paused, letting the silence charge with meaning. I went to the bathroom and it was just gone. Only that. I pointed vaguely toward the bathroom. He went in like a flash of lightning. I heard him rustle through the trash, the muffled gasp when he found the stain test. He came out, pale as death, the piece of white plastic hanging from his fingers. "My God," he murmured. He approached, sat on the edge of the bed. His anger, his suspicion, everything had dissolved in a sea of confusion and genuine horror. A selfish horror, centered on the inheritance slipping through his fingers. But horror nonetheless. Why did not you call me?" he asked with a weak voice. "I could not," I murmured, turning toward the wall. I could not speak. I just wanted everything to disappear. He touched my shoulder, a clumsy gesture. "I am sorry, Beth, I am so sorry." And in his voice, for the first time, perhaps there was a hint of true remorse, not for me or the child that never existed, but for the perfect plan vanishing, for the inheritance now up in the air, for the chaos that had entered his orderly life. I did not reply. I let my silence and the forged test in his hand do the work. While he kept watch over my feigned sleep from a chair in the corner, under the sheets, I smiled in the darkness. I had dodged a bullet and handed him, without him knowing, the ultimate weapon for my next move. His guilt. A guilt that, carefully manipulated, would be more lethal than any rage. The air at the Napa estate smelled of damp earth, crushed grapes, and conflict disguised as celebration. The annual harvest party for Grandpa Albert was traditionally a joyous affair. This year, with Albert bedridden in a hospital and the will still unsigned, it was a brewing battlefield. I arrived on David's arm. I wore a simple white linen dress, but under the neckline, the cloth sling immobilizing my left arm was visible. A fall down the stairs, I had explained to the few who asked. David, beside me, smiled at the guests with a tension that cracked the corners of his lips. His hand under my elbow was not support. It was a claw. Eleanor received us at the entrance of the old mansion. Her kiss on my cheek was icy, her gaze evaluating, scrutinizing the farce of our union. "Beth, you look pale." "And that arm," she said without a shred of warmth. "A careless slip, mother-in-law." "Nothing serious," I replied with forced sweetness. "David has been so solicitous." She did not answer. She only shifted her gaze to her son, who paled slightly. The message was clear. The show had to be flawless. The party took place among the oak barrels of the winery, illuminated by lanterns. Family, friends, neighbors, some partners from David's firm. A mosaic of curious looks and contained whispers. I circulated, smiled, accepted condolences for my loss with downcast eyes. David followed me like a nervous shadow, toasting, laughing too loudly. I had given precise instructions to Nicole through an anonymous message. "If you want to see him fall, come to the estate today. The whole family is here. The whole truth will come out." To Paul, who was no longer Alex but simply my cousin. "Again, bring the copies of everything. And do not leave Nicole's side. Make sure she gets in." And to my lawyer Morgan, who was among the guests, discreetly. "When the fire starts, make sure no one leaves until it goes out." The moment arrived after the main toast, when the foreman, with his rough voice, asked for silence to remember Grandpa Albert and wish for a good harvest. The air grew heavy with false sentimentality. David, intoxicated by wine and pressure, took the floor. "Thank you all," he said with his glass raised. "On behalf of my wife Beth and myself, and in memory of the grandfather who guides us today, we toast to this land, to this family, and to the future we will build together, solid and united." His words sounded hollow, metallic. It was then that the large wooden doors of the winery swung wide open. Nicole's silhouette, outlined against the evening light, looked like an apparition. She was dressed in black, a simple dress, but her face was marked by fierce determination. Beside her, Paul, looking serious, carried a folder of documents. A murmur rippled through the room. David stood paralyzed, his glass halfway to his lips. I merely tilted my head as if I were also surprised. "Who is that woman?" Eleanor asked coldly beside me. "I think she is a co-worker of David's," I replied in a whisper that several people could hear. Nicole walked down the center aisle that the crowd instinctively opened for her. Her eyes, shining with anger and a few glasses of liquid courage, never left David. "A toast to union," she exclaimed, and her sharp, clear voice cut the air like a knife. "Do you toast to me too, David? To the 8 months I was your family, in cheap hotels, in your office after work." The silence was absolute. You could hear a faucet dripping somewhere. "Nicole, please, this is not the place," David tried with a voice he wanted to be firm but came out broken. No. What is the place, David?" "The courthouse, when you ask for the divorce you promised me after New Year's, or when you sign for the inheritance of this winery that you only want for yourself." Eleanor stepped forward, her face a mask of fury. "How dare you come here to spew these slanders? Get out immediately." "The slanders, ma'am," Nicole retorted, turning to her. "He tells them to you every night when he calls me to say that his wife is sick, and that he has to hold out a little longer until the old man dies and the money is his." The scandal erupted in whispers, in looks going from David to me. I placed my good hand on my heart, a perfectly rehearsed gesture of pain. "Is that true, David?" Eleanor asked, and her voice trembled, not from pain but from contained rage. "You used this woman and now you bring her here to humiliate us." "It is a lie," David shouted desperately. "She is crazy. Beth, say something to her, please." I looked at Nicole, then at David, and then I dropped the mask. That of the sick wife, that of the deceived, hurting woman. My face emptied of emotion. "What do you want me to say, David?" "That I did not hear you promise her you would divorce me to marry her." I took my phone out of my dress pocket. I did not turn it on. I just held it. I have the recording right here. I heard it in the middle of the night in my own house. David turned so pale I thought he would pass out. Nicole, emboldened by my intervention, pressed on. "It is not just that," she shouted, pointing at Paul, who raised the folder. "He is corrupt. He manipulates his clients' funds, bribes officials. I have the proof. It is all here." It was the straw that broke the camel's back. David let out a roar like a cornered animal. He was no longer the calculating lawyer or the pretending husband. He was a man whose world was crumbling before his eyes, and he only saw one cause. Me. You, he bellowed, shoving a guest who tried to calm him aside and lunging at me. You are a lying witch. You have ruined everything. His hand grabbed me by my good shoulder and pushed me with all his might. I lost my balance and fell backward against the sharp edge of a solid wood table holding tasting vats. The impact on my side and arm was sharp, causing a dull crack followed by intense pain that tore a scream from me. The vats spilled. The red wine stained my white dress and the stone floor. Chaos erupted. Screams. Eleanor letting out a shriek. People running. Through a fog of pain I saw Nicole step back in horror, as if she did not expect this reaction. I saw Paul holding up the folder like a shield, and then amidst the confusion 2 figures in uniform appeared. The Napa County Sheriff's deputies. Morgan, my lawyer, must have discreetly called them, as we had agreed given the possibility of altercations. Stop, nobody move, shouted one of the officers seeing the scene. Me on the floor in pain, David standing over me, rage still distorting his face. David let go, looking at his own hands as if he did not recognize them. The officer stepped in. Ma'am, you need an ambulance. First this, I managed to say with a panting voice, pointing with my good hand at the folder Paul held, and then at David. This man, my husband, assaulted me in front of everyone, and I have proof that he embezzles funds from his firm, that he conspires to defraud. The pain made me swallow hard, but I continued, fixing my gaze on Eleanor, who was watching the scene with a twisted face, and that he only wanted this marriage and this child that never existed for his inheritance. The last words dropped like stones in a pond. Child that never existed. The silence became even deeper. Eleanor looked at me, then at her son, and in her eyes died the last remnant of faith or complicity. Is it true? She asked David with a voice that was barely a hoarse whisper. David could not answer. He only lowered his head in defeat. One of the sheriff's deputies approached Paul, who handed him the folder without a word. The other knelt beside me. We are going to call an ambulance, ma'am, and we will take everyone's statements. While the officer spoke on the radio, I sat up with help, leaning on my good arm. The pain in my side and left arm was intense, but my mental clarity was absolute. I looked at Eleanor. The winery mother-in-law, I said with the little breath I had left. Grandpa's legacy for a stable family, for a solid marriage. Do you think this represents that? She did not look at me. Her eyes were fixed on David, who was now being handcuffed, staring blankly at the wine-soaked floor. Then she turned to the sheriff's deputy reviewing the documents in the folder. Everything in there is true. I can corroborate some transactions. I saw them in his bank statements. Her voice was flat, lifeless. He is no longer my son, and he will not touch a cent of this family. The inheritance. She paused and finally looked at me with a mix of horror and cold respect. It is yours, Beth, yours alone. Do with it what you want. The handcuffs snapped shut around David's wrists with a metallic click. He looked up one last time. He did not look at me. He looked at the vineyard stretching beyond the open doors, bathed in the last light of dusk. His inheritance lost. The ambulance arrived. As they loaded me onto the stretcher, with my arm provisionally immobilized, I saw Nicole walking away through the crowd, her head bowed, revenge fulfilled but bitter. I saw Paul talking with the sheriff's deputies. I saw Eleanor standing alone and upright in the middle of the chaos, the matriarch of a family that had just crumbled. The pain was intense, piercing. But as the ambulance pulled away, leaving behind the estate and the cry of the vineyards, a deep sigh that was not of relief, but of a massive clean emptiness, escaped my lips. The harvest was over. The crushed grapes, sour and violent, were now in the press. Now all that was left was to wait and see what kind of wine, if any remained, would come out of all that. The diagnosis was a clean fracture of the ulna, painful, limiting, but not catastrophic. Like my life, I thought as the doctor at the hospital in Napa put on the final cast, a heavy gray cast that would become my companion for the following weeks. A physical reminder of the night everything fell apart. David spent the night at the police station. The charges were serious. Battery, embezzlement, bribery. My statements, Nicole's evidence backed by Paul's folder, and the cold corroboration of his own mother Eleanor, formed an apparently irrefutable case. His firm suspended him immediately. His reputation, that polished facade of a successful lawyer, shattered into pieces in a matter of hours, scattered by the local press and whispers in the hallways of the courthouse. I settled temporarily in the main house of the winery. I could not drive with my arm in a cast, and the house in San Francisco was full of ghosts and the smell of betrayal. Eleanor had returned to San Francisco, to her silent mourning and her anger now directed solely at her son. The estate was a place of rough peace, inhabited by Tony, the foreman, and a couple of women who came to clean. The silence was profound, broken only by the wind in the vineyards and the distant rattle of a tractor. The first few days were a fog. The pain from the fracture was sharp, but the inner emptiness was wider. I had won. I had saved the inheritance, unearthed the truth, and buried my husband's life. But the victory tasted like ash. The nights were long, and in the darkness, it was not the image of a handcuffed David that visited me, but that of Nicole with her wine-stained blue dress or that of Eleanor with her world of appearances shattered to pieces. I had been the architect of all that ruin. Justice, however deserved, left a bitter aftertaste. Tony inadvertently became my anchor. A man of few words and wise hands. He brought me simple food, explained the condition of the vines to me, accompanied me on short walks along the borders of the property. Cabernet is strong, Mrs. Beth, he would say, stroking a leaf. It withstands drought, but it has to be pruned decisively. Otherwise the branch gets woody and the cold breaks it. His unintentional metaphors struck me directly. I had pruned myself, cutting David out of my previous life. Now I was in the woody phase, hoping not to break. The legal proceedings advanced. Morgan, my lawyer, was relentless. The divorce would be quick with the criminal charges involved. David, out on bail, tried to make contact with a flowery letter full of textbook remorse. I threw it into the fireplace without finishing it. Other calls to a phone number I had changed. There was nothing to say. The bridge was burned, and I had no intention of navigating its rotten waters. A month later, with the cast still uncomfortable but the pain now dull, I had to travel to San Francisco for a boutique wine fair, where our winery, now solely in my name, had a small stand. It was my first public appearance since the scandal. I dressed simply, a black pantsuit, the cast on my arm visible like a declaration of past war. The looks were a mix of curiosity, pity, and in some cases hidden admiration. The story had spread like wildfire in certain circles. It was there, among oak barrels and glossy catalogs, that I met him. Jacob was not your typical winemaker. He came from a small operation in Sonoma, but he spoke of the land and the grape with the passion of a poet and the precision of a scientist. We met next to a display of natural yeasts. He was politely arguing with a French producer about maceration times. I listened, engrossed. "Excuse me," I interrupted, unable to help myself. "But if you extend the maceration too much with that variety, even cold, you risk extracting bitterness. The skin is thinner than it seems." Both turned around. The Frenchman looked at me with annoyance. Jacob with curiosity. "You are right," he said, smiling. His eyes were the color of wet earth. "You can tell you speak from experience." "From theory rather," I admitted. "I am learning as I go." "The best wines are made that way," he replied. With feet in the mud and an open mind. Jacob Rivera. We shook hands. His was rough, calloused. I noticed he carefully avoided my casted arm without asking questions. We talked about vines, soil, the madness of barrel prices. Nothing personal. It was a relief. A space where Beth was not the deceived wife or the vindictive heiress, but just someone with a winery who did not quite know how to manage it. He offered concrete advice, names of good foremen, warnings about unscrupulous merchants. His knowledge was deep, generous. As evening fell, the fair closed. He invited me for a glass of his wine, a young but surprisingly complex red, on a terrace by the bay. The San Francisco Bay shone golden under the late afternoon sun. "It is an honest wine," he said, watching me taste it. "No tricks, just how I like it." "Honest," I repeated, and the word tasted strange in my mouth after months of lies. "A rare commodity." He looked at me without pressing. He did not ask about the cast. He did not ask about my life. He only talked about how he had also inherited his father's vineyard years ago, and the mistakes he had made, and the slow satisfaction of seeing how the land gives back to you, with time and care, what you put into it. After everything that has happened, he suddenly said, looking at the bay in your winery, "Do you still believe in it? In building something that lasts? In trusting?" The question was not about him. It was about everything. About David, about love, about promises, about my own capacity not to poison with my cynicism the land that was now mine. I twirled the glass between my fingers, the healthy hand and the one disabled by the cast. I looked west, where the sun was beginning to kiss the line of cypresses on the far shore. I thought of the vines in Napa, hard, resistant, that had survived droughts and frosts, that yielded a small but intense fruit, that needed time, patience, and a firm hand to become something worthwhile. I looked at Jacob. His eyes were not looking for an easy answer. They were looking for the truth. "I believe," I said, and my voice sounded firmer than I expected. "In what can be touched, pruned, and cared for, in deep roots, in slow work, in the truth that comes out of the press, sour or sweet, but always clear. That is the only thing I believe in now, in what can be cultivated and hopefully harvested with one's own hands." He nodded slowly. He did not smile, but his eyes softened. He toasted with me to honest harvests. Then there were no promises, no plans, just the soft clink of two wine glasses meeting in the twilight air of San Francisco over a bay that had seen empires rise and fall. Something had broken inside me, yes, but under the cast and the scar, maybe, just maybe, a callus was beginning to form, not one of bitterness but one of resilience. That of the vine that, after pruning, prepares slowly and stubbornly to bear its fruit again. In its time, in my time. Did you enjoy this story? Leave a comment and hit the subscribe button to support the channel. More tales are on the way.